listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. Today, we have another amazing show lineup for y'all. We have a special guest today that is going to give us amazing information. First and foremost, I want to say welcome to the show, Vitale. She is going to tell us a lot of great things today. But before we get into today's topic, can you introduce yourself to our audience and let us know what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Vitale, and I'm a leadership consultant and business owner, and I focus on helping people overcome perfectionism, both in their personal lives and the workplace.
And you are the president and CEO of the Hardin Group. People can visit your website, thehardingroup.co. Kind of tell us a little bit about your organization and how you serve your clients.
So perfectionism is something that is deeply rooted in me. And it's something that held me back for more than 3 decades, Shamaya. So I grew up in a household where there was alcoholism. And so I learned at a young age that the only time I ever would receive love and attention was for me being perfect. And then when I was a senior in college, I discovered Adderall and became addicted to it for 10 years. So from age 21 to 31, I was addicted to Adderall. And I was in corporate America at the time. No one knew, right? I was climbing the corporate ladder, making more money, growing my team, getting better titles. And nearly 10 years ago, I made the decision to change. And when I got sober, as anyone does, right, a major life shift like that, you do a lot of introspection. And I realized it had nothing to do with my addiction to Adderall and everything to do with my addiction to perfection. And so I started doing a lot of research around perfectionism and creating content around it, and realized that it is extremely pervasive. And so I help workplaces overcome their cultures of perfectionism. I help leaders lead with excellence instead of perfectionism. And so it's something that I turn my personal pain into my purpose.
When it comes to finding studies, being able to work with your clients, what's some of the stats, if you will, that kind of stuck out for you?
Yeah, so I couldn't find a whole lot of research on perfectionism. So I hired a research firm to do 2 national studies for me. And it shows that 92% of people are struggling with some form of perfectionism. 85% of workplaces have cultures of perfectionism. Perfectionism impacts our productivity by 62%, our ability to innovate by 66%, and our confidence by 62% as well. So those are just some of the stats, but it is a major issue that goes unaddressed in the workplace.
You have a very impressive portfolio of your clients that you've been able to work with. What's some of the findings that you found in being able to look back and reflect after working with these clients?
I don't believe that really any culture has an intentional culture of perfectionism. It's just by default. And how does perfectionism show up in the workplace? It shows up as, unrealistic deadlines, unrealistic timelines, performance management isn't as successful as it should be because people aren't having the right conversations. They aren't holding people accountable. People aren't delegating in the workplace because they don't trust other people to do it as well as them. And so when we don't delegate, that slows down the talent pipeline internally. Crucial conversations are being avoided because people don't feel equipped to have difficult conversations, or they're afraid of that. There's a lack of work-life balance. So people are burning out more quickly. And because of this, productivity is low. People have a fear of failure, so innovation is low. And so when you can heal these things, you then create cultures of trust, belonging, psychological safety, levels with cultures with very effective communication, cultures that have extremely successful rates of performance management and an internal talent pipeline. So it can be extremely powerful.
You listen on Refocus Radio, talking to our guest today, Vitale Buford Hardin. She is the president and CEO of the Hardin Group. You can go to thehardingroup.co. And speaking of culture and the workplace, communication is key. You kind of touched on that. But we also hear about this thing called emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Tell us, our audience, a little bit what that means and how that plays a role.
So emotional intelligence is important. I'm a big believer that who we are is how we lead. And so we have to be aware of ourselves. We have to have our own emotional intelligence in order to be effective leaders, right? So if we have low emotional intelligence, if we have low self-awareness, then that is going to show up in how we lead others. And so from the lens of perfectionism, we first have to understand how perfectionism is showing up for us. And so when I teach this stuff, we always do a deep dive around your own perfectionism patterns. And so there are two types of perfectionism that I've created. There's slow and there's fast. So slow perfectionism, Shemaya, is a kind of perfectionism that keeps you stuck. So I want you to think procrastination, low productivity, fear of failure, avoiding crucial conversations, you're not delegating, imposter syndrome. Then on the other end of the spectrum is fast perfectionism. So fast perfectionism is the workaholism, people-pleasing, unrealistic expectations, chronic multitasking. And so it shows up in different ways. And so emotional intelligence is knowing, again, your own strengths and weaknesses. Emotional intelligence is being able to understand and recognize your emotions and how those emotions then affect others. Emotional intelligence also has to do with how our emotions impact our ability to tolerate stress and how it impacts our decision making. And so all of this intersects with perfectionism for sure.
When it comes to the workplace culture, I mean, it's always pressure when there's certain times of the year, we just got through the holidays before the new year, and deadlines are pretty on point when it comes to we need this done before the end of the year. When it comes to dealing with those pressures and being able to have an environment of workers who are still excited and not just drained in those times, what are some of the things that you work with your clients to kind of facilitate that environment to where we're still locked in on our goals, but we still have enthusiasm?
It's really about understanding the norms of your leadership team or your culture and really figuring out where you want the boundaries to be. So, if the end of the year, there's always a big push, then you communicate around that, right? And then maybe it's at the beginning of the year, you give everyone more time off or, allow people to work, have a more flexible work schedule, maybe the first 2 weeks of the year, if everyone's goals were hit and everyone really put in their best effort at that end of the year. So we can't avoid those big timelines and deadlines and pushes to get things done, but we can also manage around them. So I think communicating around that helps with employee engagement. Also, I think a lot of things that happen at the end of the year are performance reviews and kind of the comp conversations. And it's really important for organizations to have those fast, have them early, and have them clearly. Because when people are blindsided by their comp conversations, when they are blindsided by their performance reviews, that means as an organization and as leaders, we are not doing our job. So even clearly communicating around that is really, really important. Also, another idea too is if you're wanting people to check out of work, after, if you don't want your employees to be answering emails after 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. or whatever it is, then as a leader, don't be sending emails at night. Even if you say, hey, I'm sending this email, but I don't expect you to respond until tomorrow, your employees are still thinking about that email. They've checked it. Now you're in their head and now they're thinking about work. So be really thoughtful about your boundaries and adhere to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when you are being in that position of kind of allowing your clients to see the bigger picture, kind of look beyond their old patterns, if you will. The other thing that you hit on is communication. We all have old patterns of how we used to communicate to where we are, how we're communicating today. Those are skill sets. What are some of the skills that you help your clients to pass on to their employees? Because it's both situation where it goes both ways. Leadership and employees, they have to develop better communication skills.
So I do a lot of things around communication. One of the things that's really effective is there's 4 different communication styles, right? There's analytical communication, there's functional communication, there is personal communicators, and then intuitive communicators. And so all of us will fall into one of those categories. And so there's online quizzes that you can take for that to find out which communication style you lean toward. But it's really important to know your communication style, and even more important to know the communication styles of those that you work with. So that's really, really important. Make sure you're communicating, right? If I am a personal communicator, meaning I love to talk to you about your life and get to know you and connect, but then I'm talking to someone in the accounting department who is a functional communicator, we might butt heads. It doesn't mean that we can't communicate, but just making sure I'm communicating in their style and vice versa. So even just knowing people's communication styles can help you communicate better. And then when it comes to, crucial conversations, making sure that you practice them, that you lean into them, and that you have them instead of avoiding them or bulldozing them. So we typically avoid a difficult conversation or we bulldoze it. And so instead of either of those extremes, we want to meet in the middle, right? And be thoughtful about those crucial conversations and have them fast, have them early.
Yeah, that ties into part of the emotional intelligence we were talking about a little bit earlier. Once again, this is on Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, Vitale Buford Hardin. She is the president and CEO of the Hardin Group. You can go to thehardingroup.co. Let's kind of dive into the different services that your company does with corporate programs and speaking. What are some of the different styles of team development and leadership that you cover with your services?
One of the things about me is that I'm definitely not a surface level coach or a surface level consultant. I really like to do the real work, the work that's deeper, the cultural work. So there's typically two tracks, right? There's the culture level work. So this is the deeper work that happens with your executive teams. And then there is the people change work. And so this is the leadership training, leadership consulting, executive coaching, ongoing leadership development program work. And so both of those tracks are necessary for sustainable ongoing change. For me, I always love to start an engagement. I call it a discovery phase. And this is where, based on the size of the organization, I will interview a cohort of leaders that are spread across the organization, different tenures, different departments. And I will interview them a series of questions just about the organization, pros, cons, things that they think are great, things they want to see changed. And then I review a lot of the organization's strategic assets. So we're thinking, handbooks, engagement surveys, internal communication processes, SOPs. And so I'll review the strategic assets. I'll also do those interviews. And then based on that, I put together an executive briefing of my results with a suggestion of priorities to implement in terms of leadership change. This allows me to know exactly what needs to happen versus just putting a program on and hoping it changes things. Another thing that is really effective is ongoing leadership development. My favorite thing is to work with clients over a period of years for real and sustainable change. A lot of companies just want to bring in a consultant or a coach or a trainer to do a 2-day training, check the box, and move on. But a 2-day training doesn't move the needle. You need ongoing training to change behavior. And so those are some of the ways that I really love to work with organizations.
You're empowering both the employer and employee to not just perform better, but almost like a lifestyle, because I feel like sometimes you can be at work and then obviously you're going to be yourself outside of work. But there's some similar qualities that people will do in the free time and also, and if I will, game time, because you're on the field making sure that the company's brand is on the best display ever. When you look at that, like, what are some of the things that you've seen as a trend, or not trend, as a pattern with your clients when they are facing some issues with employees being in that mindset?
So I would say that what I see trend-wise and where organizations are moving is really allowing the whole person to show up at work. Now, that's not happening overnight, but the pandemic made us all more human than ever. And so to have an organization that has psychological safety and high trust and a culture of belonging means that you allow the whole person to come to work, right? That the person who leaves work is the same person that comes to work. And so for me, I've seen a trend of just allowing people to be their authentic, true selves in the workplace.
And that leads up to my follow-up question. How can leaders help encourage and incorporate feedback from employees regarding the impact of perfectionism on their work experiences?
Sometimes with organizations, I'll do an internal survey with a variety of questions around perfectionism, so we can gauge it from that perspective. And so we're able to get an assessment of what types of perfectionism are showing up, how is it showing up for people. So just doing an assessment is a way to get clear, and then we're able to create programs and training and new norms to overcome those patterns of perfectionism in the workplace.
And that also can tie into a hot topic that has been definitely last year, I'm sure it might be ongoing, is mental health. When it comes to mental health support, what are some ways management can kind of encourage their employees to pay attention to their mental health?
By having open and honest communication about the importance of mental health, connecting to the dots that, having strong and good and like having good mental health helps them as humans, showing up both in the workplace and outside of the workplace. Organizations having employee assistance programs, insurance reimbursement for therapy appointments, having mental health workshops on a variety of topics internally can be helpful. Encouraging people to take mental health days if mental health days are something that the organization encourages. So it's not just about talking about these things, but really walking the talk. So encouraging people to use those resources.
Once again, talking to our guest, Vitale Buford Hardin. She's the president and CEO of the Hardin Group, the hardingroup.co. Man, time is zooming by fast. Before we let you go, a couple more questions. When it comes to dealing with success, and obviously companies want to measure that success, and we touch on job performance, all that. When it comes to measuring success from a leadership perspective, what are some of the ways that they can look for certain key ingredients, right, on someone's performance and use that to measure how they can continue to lead further?
I think that, we have the normal metrics for measuring success. I think that in terms of creating a culture of trust and belonging and psychological safety, things to start looking at and measuring are work-life boundaries. So people using their vacation days. So not just looking outside of the normal metrics, looking at metrics that involve the whole person or different ways of doing things. So for example, perfectionism really prohibits innovation in the workplace, right? Because people have a fear of failure and a fear of making mistakes. And so they don't share new, brilliant, exciting ideas. So because of that, people, they aren't sharing their ideas. There's lower innovation. So one of the things that you could measure with that is you could measure mistakes and you could measure failure, right? And so because failure, you can't have success without failure. And so, most organizations, look down upon failure, but actually what if we celebrated or normalized failure as an organization? What if we came up with metrics around normalizing failure? That would be a really cool thing to measure in terms of people feeling safe in the workplace.
Earlier, we talked about some of the statistics of your studies that you hired a research company to perform, knowing some of the, knowing that there's a need to resolve this culture of perfectionism. You've written a book called Addicted to Perfect. Tell us a little bit about your book and how that also deals with this topic.
Yeah, so I wrote my memoir. I wrote it in 2019. It was published in 2020. So it's my very personal story of how perfectionism really afflicted me and how I overcame it. I'm actually this year writing my second book, which is called Forget Perfect, and it's about how to turn the volume down on your perfectionism, both in life and at work. But the one that you're referring to is my memoir, and it's my personal story of all the pieces of perfectionism, how it showed up for me, and how I was finally able to let it go.
This is a new year. We're out of the gate. Is a new fresh start. I mean, a lot of people have their, New Year resolution or whatever, but we kind of know that that's kind of outdated. Most people now are like, you know what, I just have to do something with my life and start with baby steps. You have a ton of experience being your own boss, but also have 15 years, I believe, on your bio in corporate life. Mm-hmm. What are some of the values that you hold to your core that allows you to have balance in maintaining, striving for your goals?
That's a really good question. So for me, I'm not a resolution person. I think in terms of values, authenticity is one of my top values. Openness is my word for 2024. And what I mean by that is just being open to where this year takes me and where it leads me and where opportunities take me, instead of needing to be a control freak all the time. Allowing yourself to evolve and change. That's one of my core values. Just allow yourself to evolve. As humans, we change, and we're allowed to change our minds, and we're allowed to change our opinions. And so just even allowing yourself space to grow. And then my mantra, in which I live my life by, is you can't miss out on what's meant for you. And I love that mantra so much because it's true for everyone. You can't miss out on your opportunities. Those are yours. And for me, that just allows for more openness and evolution in my life and fluidity.
And that's a great point. I want to go back because I'm here looking through your website. You had some graphs that were like the stats with the research thing. And one thing that stuck out to me was the belief that being too perfect perfectionism, it will lead to failure. And that is 66% believe that. And when it comes to failure and fear, man, that's a big thing, because to your point throughout the whole show, sometimes that lack of emotional intelligence can be caused by fear.
Yes. Yeah, our insecurities, our fear of not being enough. And perfectionism is, simply put, fear that we're not good enough, fear that we're not lovable, that we're not worthy. And for me, I spent so much of my life living in that fear. And that's why it's my life's purpose to help people overcome that. Because when you can let that fear go, anything becomes possible for you.
Walk the walk, talk the talk. That's what your company is doing. And if you have one message to a CEO that needs to call and contact you to like you said, do an interview, find out what they're all about, and see if they're a good fit, what message will you say to CEOs who are serious about taking their business to the next level in 2024?
Yeah. So for CEOs that are serious about taking their business to the next level, I would say they need to take their culture to the next level. They need to do a deep dive on the cultural things and norms that are holding them back, and make the time investment and financial investment and in making that sustainable change.
Once again, true pleasure talking to our guest today, Vitale Buford Hardin. She is the president and CEO of the Hardin Group. You can go visit their website, thehardingroup.co. Before we let you go, what's the best way they can contact your team?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is thehardingroup.co.co, and my email and everything and contact information is there.
Once again, Vitale, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shemai. Take care.